Hello. This is a Cavendish banana. That yellow fruit you can see anywhere in the United States, whether that's in supermarkets, the cafeteria, or even on the kitchen counters in many homes. But did you know that this banana is not the same banana that your grandparents or great-grandparents ate 60 years ago? And by that, I mean we're eating an entirely different species of banana. The species that was eaten by individuals who lived before or during the 1950s and 1960s was called the Gros Michel. The Gros Michel is a bigger, sweeter fruit with thicker skin. And you may have noticed that whenever you eat banana-flavored things, they don't really taste like banana. Well, your taste buds don't lie. And that's because many banana flavors are made to taste like the Gros Michel, not the Cavendish banana, the variety that we eat today. Well, if the Gros Michel is a bigger, sweeter, and tastier fruit, why are we not eating it? So the Gros Michel had an unfortunate demise in the 1950s and 60s. To understand a little bit more about the problem that caused the demise of the Gros Michel, we have to understand how plants, such as bananas, are cultivated today. Bananas are fruits, and they're native to South and Southeast Asia. While there's only one type of commercial banana, there are dozens of species and even thousands of different varieties of bananas that contain hard seeds because they're fruits. However, when you look at a modern-day commercial banana, you may notice that the seeds are impossible to find. And that's because over time, we've cultivated bananas to have smaller and smaller seeds. What's left are those tiny little black specks in the middle of the banana that are unfertile seeds. Thus, in order to grow another banana plant, we have to take the stem from an existing banana plant, plant it in the ground, and a new one will grow. However, that ensures that every single banana that you've eaten in your life is a clone of each other. And there lies the problem. A global monoculture, or cultivation of a single crop over a given area, of genetically identical individuals, is great for producing crops of consistent quality. However, to a pathogen, that's a beautiful sight. The pathogen essentially only has to infect a single individual, and it can kill off every other one. And that's exactly what happened to the Gros Michel. The Gros Michel, with its genetic monotony, allowed a fungicide-resistant pathogen, Panama disease, to kill it off. And it was soon replaced with the Cavendish, a blander banana, but it was resistant to that strain of Panama disease. So the banana crisis of the 1950s and 1960s left many people wondering why there was only one variety of the crop that was planted. And that answer has to do with our changing agricultural system, as it has evolved to accommodate the growing population our world has faced. 200 years ago in the United States, more than 90% of all individuals were farmers, and each farmer on average had to produce enough food to feed 10 people. But as the world became entrenched in an industrial economy, the number of farmers decreased, and today, one farmer must produce enough food to feed 200 people. And in order to accommodate our skyrocketing world population, a chemically intensive food system was developed. At the center of this chemically intensive food system is monoculture. Monoculture enabled many farmers to produce the high yields and satisfy the growing demand for food. However, this system dramatically decreases biodiversity, which is a significant problem. As farmers are incorporated into our international economies by corporate organizations, incentives for diversity disappear, and monoculture is rewarded by economies of scale. Take, for example, farmer Ryan Cranny, featured in PBS's 2009 documentary, Botany of Desire. As globalization increases, food corporations such as McDonald's grow in size, thereby increasing the demand for certain food products. In the case of McDonald's only uses one type of potato to produce their delicious French fries. In order to keep his farm running, Cranny has had to leave out the numerous potato varieties he used to plant and instead plants the one type McDonald seeks. This loss of diversity in plants is not only happening on Cranny's farm, it's happening all over the United States and at a rapid scale. According to the UN organization, since the 1900s, more than 90% of all plant varieties have disappeared from farmers' fields. Today, 75% of all the food produced in the world is produced from only 12 species of plants and 5 species of animals. With this loss of biodiversity comes a loss in genetic diversity. Some 75% of all genetic diversity has been lost as farmers worldwide have left out their natural local varieties and embraced genetically identical, high-yielding ones. While monoculture may offer significant economic advantages, it also brings about significant environmental risks. Very simply, a vast field of genetically identical plants will always be vulnerable to insects, weeds, and diseases. This exact risk and scenario happened exactly 170 years ago, and it eradicated almost an entire nation of people. The Irish potato famine happened as a result of a dependency on a single crop and the lack of genetic diversity among the potato plants. When a strain of potato blight disease arrived in Ireland in 1845, massive amounts of the crop were wiped out. The genetic similarity of the potato plants allowed the disease to jump from one plant to the next. Had the crops had an increase in genetic diversity, there would have been a much, much greater chance of survival. However, we should learn from this lesson and learn that the devastating result of this monoculture effectively allowed 1 million people to starve to death, and 1 million more immigrated from Ireland, causing the population to drop 20 to 25%. Now that was 200 years ago, and you would assume that our current technological advances would never allow such a thing to happen again. But it is, and it's happening to our bananas. According to a study published just this November in 2015, a new strain of Panama disease is spreading. This new strain, illustrated in red, originated from northern Australia and has spread to Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. The blue dots represent the old strain that killed off the Gros Michel. Now, the spread to Africa has been incredibly significant because in Africa, the banana is not just a tasty treat, it's a major staple crop, and it's a part of national food security. Furthermore, there's currently no acceptable replacement to the Cavendish variety. So while the disease hasn't gone to Central or South America, where bananas are produced more than any other place in the world, it's highly probable that it will be there in a very short time. And it's entirely possible that we may lose the banana as a fruit in the future. So if we recognize the inherent risks of monoculture and lack of genetic diversity, why do we continue to engage in such agricultural practices that propagate it? Well, this may be a result of our increasing dependency in technology. Since the 1900s, companies such as Monsanto have developed seeds and plant varieties that have engineered resistance to pests and animals. Take corn, for example. The majority of corn in this country are engineered to have genes that produce a toxin that inhibits insects from devastating the plant. In fact, 88% of corn and 94% of all soybeans planted in this country are genetically engineered to overcome pests and diseases. And this increase in agricultural technology has also led to an increase in chemical pesticides and herbicides that are used to protect these monoculture crops that are highly vulnerable to animals and disease. Here's a picture of the agricultural productivity of the United States. In the Midwest, corn and soybeans are largely planted as a monoculture. In the next image, this illustrates the amount of herbicide used in the United States. Growing one type of crop in a large area of land increases crop vulnerability to insects and disease. This vulnerability often requires an intensive use of insecticides and herbicides, and as you will see, it looks vaguely similar to the agricultural productivity shown here. And while using herbicides and pesticides have enabled us to evade the risks of monoculture, it has caused significant environmental risks in other ways. This has increased water pollution and a loss of biodiversity, including key species such as bees. And in the case of our banana, the banana industry consumes more chemicals than any other crop industry in the world, excepting cotton. And the banana industry has also caused entire ecosystems to be wiped out. So due to an increase in population growth and decrease in the number of farmers, we've had to engage in unsustainable agricultural practices that not only harm our environment, but decrease our biodiversity and also threaten our global food supply. But we continue to invent and produce new technology to help solve the problems we've created over the years, and we assume that we will always have a solution to our problems. Our technological superiority and capacity have emboldened us to take risks, hoping that the benefits will outweigh the short and long-term consequences. However, we cannot be so sure as to assume that we will always be able to dominate nature and should prepare for the day that our crops and our food become overpowered by natural elements, leaving the 7 billion of us on this planet hungry and powerless. Thank you.